Welcome to Between Views. Today we're embarking on an extraordinary journey with Zachary Payne, a man whose life path has been anything but conventional. From a surprising church mission in Spain that rerouted his pre-med ambitions, to finding profound wisdom in the waves of Hawaii, Zach shares how language immersion, philosophical inquiry, and the simple act of body surfing shaped his unique career as a professor and poet. Prepare to be inspired by a story that redefines success and celebrates the freedom of living authentically. Welcome to Between Views, Mr. Zachary Payne. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now I'm looking outside here, it is a very cloudy, overcast day. It's cold and it's raining, and there's no place I'd rather be, I think, Zach, than where you are living at the moment, which is in Hawaii, if I've got that correct.
Yep, I'm on the island of Oahu, and it's in the afternoon. It was a beautiful blue sunny day, summertime here. So I have two little girls. They're 6 and 8, and my 8-year-old girl is doing a junior lifeguard program up on the North Shore. And so we spent 5 hours this morning up at Waimea Bay while my daughter did her junior lifeguarding.
Oh, amazing.
Best lifeguards in the world. They're teaching her CPR and rescues, and it's just an amazing program.
Wow, and they really are the best lifeguards in the world, for sure. I even have the fins that they use actually at home.
Oh, the defense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the duff fins. We're going to get on to body surfing a little bit later on in the piece. But I was just expressing a little bit of envy about the climate in which you live in as to where I am right now. However, I have been to your lovely land, and one of the main reasons that I have actually managed to get in touch with you today is because of your mate, Mr. Dominic, who was on the show before. Yeah, he when I asked him the final question that I ask on the show these days, he nominated you, and his main curiosity about you was what you would think that you had learned from the body surfing and the ocean and things like that. So we're going to touch on that a little bit later on. While I was talking with you, though, trying to plan this podcast, I realized that you and I have something in common that I really, really love, and you obviously really, really love because you've taken it as your career path. So one of the big things I'd love to talk about with you today is your career path and your time in Spain and what you learned from the Spanish language. We're going to dive right into it because, as a lot of our listeners know, I am very, very passionate about the Spanish language, and I was really excited when I heard that you were a knowledgeable person and worked within it. And I'm excited and grateful to have the chance to have you on the show today. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, no worries.
Let's go ahead and start with the first story that I had, question that I had written down for you. Could you just sort of go through your story and your journey with the Spanish language and sort of where it started and where it led you to being today? Because we always start with a story on Between Views.
Yeah, so when I was 19, I decided to serve a mission for my church.
Okay.
I'm Mormon, and so you kind of just say you want to go on a mission, and then you get a letter. Back in the day, you'd get a letter and said, you're going to this place. And so my letter came and it said, you're going to Spain. You're going to go live in Madrid for 2 years. And I was, at the time, I knew who Julio Iglesias was, and that was about it. And so we went to the local library and we checked out some books on Spain, and I did some research, and it was really funny because all the books that I checked out they would show like the southern Spain with the very narrow streets and like donkeys. And that was the Spain that was in the library books. And then a few months later, I took a flight and I landed in Madrid, and I realized that there were no donkeys, and, it was a major city, and that was a big surprise. I was born in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so, it's big, but it's not really big. And so when I got to Madrid, I kind of said I felt like Mario and Mario Brothers, because you would
Right.
go down a tube and you'd take the subway somewhere, and then you'd pop up in some other world. And I never knew where I was for about the first 4 months. I just knew that you would go down and you would come up out of another tube, and you would be somewhere else. And so I knew no Spanish when I got to Spain.
Oh wow.
Like
So
saying Spanish, Papa.
so did you have any interest in Spanish or learning Spanish when your church selected you to go on mission like that?
Well, so I mean, no, like realistically, I wanted to go to like Russia, or I wanted to go to Africa. And so, I mean, I wasn't opposed to the Spanish, but it wasn't something that, back when I was growing up in Utah was very prevalent. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, now it is, but it
Hmm.
wasn't when I was growing up. And so, you know, you do like some class a little bit before you go, but we're talking minor. But like I'm telling you, when I got to Spain and I was on the subway, if there was somebody speaking French, somebody speaking Portuguese, somebody speaking Spanish, I couldn't tell you the difference between them, because I mean, I had no idea.
No reference for it.
Yeah, and so, and kind of what they do is they just, you're there and you're usually with you're always with someone else, right? So if you've
Hmm.
ever seen them, they're like the white shirt and tie guys, and there's always two of them. And so
Yeah.
usually your partner knows more Spanish than you do, and so you just walk around, and by talking with people in the streets, you learn Spanish. So it's like
Wow.
you immersion, right? They just throw you in, and you're living in a foreign country, and if you want to talk to somebody, you have to learn Spanish.
Oh wow.
So,
So
yeah,
you really didn't see this one coming. It was just part of your church mission. It just sent
yeah,
you
it
off
was
to
like
could
it
have been
caught
any
me.
location and
Yeah, it was nothing that I knew was coming or thought was coming or was hoping for. I mean, I'd never planned to go to Spain before in my life, and
oh
then,
wow.
I mean, it ended up changing a lot of things for me. So
Yeah.
missions are 2 years. So in that 2 years, I struggled. I struggled for a long time with Spanish. Some people pick
Mm.
it up quicker, others don't. I struggled with language. It was really
Okay.
hard. I'd lived there probably a little over a year
Yeah.
before things started to kind of click. And they started to click, and I decided at that time I wasn't, because a lot of times the companions are English speakers, so you can speak English to them. But about a
Yeah.
year into my mission, I just decided I wasn't going to use English anymore, and I was
Oh
just going to use the Spanish that I had and just struggle through. And so that's kind of when the language started to function.
what
Um,
made you decide that?
to just well, I mean, you kind of just gotta go all in, right? Like if you want to,
Yeah.
you're living in Spain and you're immersed, right? Like let go of the rail and just go for it. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of what it was. It's
Wow.
kind of funny because at the start, the whole conjugation of verbs is
Mm.
something that I could not wrap my head around. It was like impossible for me to it was just a concept that was like didn't work. And so as I started progressing, I would use today to talk about the present,
Yeah.
hoy. I would
Yeah.
use ayer, like yesterday, to talk about the past. And then I would say tomorrow to talk about the future. And then all my verbs were just in the unconjugated form, right? So I would
right.
say, hoy, tener hambre, right? And so I quickly got
Uh,
the I quickly
which
got the nickname of
translates
the
as
Indian.
just for our listeners. What does that
Oh, so
translate
that
as?
would be like today, hungry, me. And so, the people that were there, they started referring to me as the Indian, right?
oh,
Because that's,
actually,
if I wanted to talk about the past, I would say yesterday, hunger, me, right? And so, but then little by little, it started working. And about a year in, I started feeling more comfortable. And
mm,
then, only using Spanish, I started to dream in Spanish, which, like, the first time that happens, it just blows you away because you're like, whoa, I didn't know you could dream in two languages.
right.
Um,
They say
and by
that is one of the key points of letting you know that you have you've reached that certain level of Spanish where you understand it enough
Yeah.
to relate in it. That's one of the key things that I always remember them saying when I first started learning the language too, was once you dream in it and you can make someone laugh in it, you're right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
No, and so like that, and then it gets like even weirder. Like when you dream with people from Spain and people from America, and you're jumping back and forth from English and Spanish, and you're like, whoa,
Mm.
this is crazy. So basically, as a missionary, there's a lot of rules. You live by a lot of rules because you're a missionary. There's a lot of things you can't do, and so by the time I was finishing my 2 years, I was thinking, man, Madrid's a really fun place. It would be really fun if I wasn't a missionary, and so I came home off my mission, and my desire was to move back to Spain and live there, not as a missionary. So about 6 months after my mission, I moved back to do a year of the uni in Madrid.
Wow. What
And
did you study?
so I just registered as so because the Spanish education system is socialized, it's very inexpensive compared to the
Mm.
American system,
That's
and
right.
so I figured to increase my Spanish skills, I would just study Spanish literature. And so I registered as like, you can't register as a first year student as a foreigner, but you could register as like a second year. So I did the second year of basically Spanish language and literature at the University of
Wow.
Madrid, Complutense.
So was it the place or the language that you loved, or a mixture of both?
It was both. It was the place, Madrid, but also the language, because they go hand in hand, right? And
Mm.
then I would say that during that first year in the university, then I fell in love with more with the people. Just
Mm.
had some amazing friends in uni, and fell more in love with the culture and
Mm.
more in love with the language as I continued to learn.
Wow. I have so many questions coming up. And they are, what's so great about Madrid? Uh, the other one is, what's so amazing about the Spanish people? And what's so amazing about the language? So you can answer all three at once if you
Okay,
like.
so no, like, Madrid. So a lot of foreigners, I would recommend they go to Barcelona. It's more touristy. You have the
Mm.
architect that's new and old. Um, but for me, Madrid is, Granada is pretty, right? Like when people ask me to travel to Spain, like a lot of times I tell them to go everywhere but Madrid because
Oh,
I think
really?
as a tourist, there's places that are more touristy and that can be appreciated more as a tourist. But what it comes down to is Madrid is just it's a bunch of little neighborhoods, and
Oh, really?
every little neighborhood has its own character and it's got its own feeling. And so for me to just walk the streets of Madrid, and I always would talk about just getting lost and walking the streets, and you walk from one neighborhood and then you're in another neighborhood and everything's changed, right? And it even
Mm.
like the nightlife in Madrid, there's areas where I'm going to date myself, right? But there was neighborhoods that was all grunge, and then the
Mm.
next street over, it's jazz, or then you're 3 streets over, the neighborhood changes and it's heavy metal, and right. And what really the people really follow the fashion of the music they listen to,
Mm. Yeah,
and
that's what
so
I noticed
like
when I was in Spain too.
if you're in grunge area, like everybody's grunge, and then like if you're in the heavy metal section, everybody's like heavy metal, and so um, and then like the shops change, right? Because if you're like, they kind of cater to their public, right? And so
Yeah.
every little neighborhood has its own little character, and yeah, it's just beautiful. And so it's still
Which
today.
neighborhood were you in? Which one did you fit
Um,
in most?
Realistically, a lot of my first years in Spain, I spent at Plaza dos de Mayo, um, the 2nd of May Plaza, which is in the neighborhood of Malasañas.
Mm.
It's the neighborhood that would be more grunge, more punk, um, and so this ties into the culture. The culture, people just like to have fun.
Mm.
They're just ripe for fun. It's like, it doesn't matter what's going to go on. It's going to be fun, right? There's a protest. It's going to be the funnest protest you ever went to, right?
Mm.
And so when I was in the university there, the idea of I never had to make plans. because I knew the people I wanted to see from the university would be in the neighborhood just drinking on the street. And so then,
Mm.
you just show up and you'd bump into one person, and start having a conversation with them. And then you'd bump into other people. And then all of a sudden you had a group and, you know,
Right, because that's a big thing in Spain, isn't it? I noticed that a lot of people after work go and have they ir de cañas. They have like a
yeah,
little beer after work, and that's where they kind of socialize and wind down for the day. And I noticed that it was happening all over the place. And I found it, in Australia, we do that sometimes, but there's pubs and things. You always sit inside. It's barely. I don't feel like we're outside on the street there that much, so that you can't just walk past and see someone kind of thing a lot of the time.
yeah. Well, and so there was just a happiness, like a happiness and a party in the streets. And people, I mean, for the most part, there was a lot of shops that would sell you whatever you wanted to drink so that you could drink it on the street. And it was cheaper to buy from one of these shops than buying from, the bar or the discotheque, right? And so
Yeah.
it kind of helped out that's the reason why people were on the streets. As I've thought about it, the other thing that helped, being in the street is it's usually not as loud as it is in a bar.
Hmm.
And so for me, being
So
a
you can
second
talk.
language learner, it was a lot easier for me to have conversations with people
Of
in the
course.
street outside than all of a sudden in a dance club or in a bar where there's all the ruckus and all the loud
Yeah.
music.
Because that's level like C5 in Spanish, trying to understand someone inside a bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, then, it was just school was amazing. I mean, I was in classes with 80 students and there were 75 Spanish people and maybe 4 or 5 foreigners. And then the
Wow.
ratio, I mean, there was probably 75, 80% girls in my classes. And so that, was an added bonus.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you first turn up, it's going
Yeah.
to keep you going back to classes for sure. Um, that's amazing. So you got to your church sent you over, and you didn't see that coming. When you got there, you fell in love with it, the people, the language, the place. Madrid, not typically touristy, yet it had a unique charm for you because of the little barrios and the blocks that it was
Yeah.
divided into, and also the people hanging out on the street made it really easy for you to learn your language. So you
Yeah.
start taking class, and you're surrounded by Spanish girls, and you're learning a language you love. You're living in a place you enjoy. It just sounds blissful. So what happened next?
So I did my first year in the university and I moved back to Utah. And
Hmm.
the funny thing is all growing up, I wanted to be a doctor, like a medical
Ah,
doctor. And
okay.
so I moved back and I started up at the University of Utah and I was pre-med and I was working at the hospital and doing all that kind of stuff you need to do to get into the medical school. And as I was working nights at the hospital, I was talking with a lady who was finishing up her residency. And one night we were talking and she asked me if there was anything else I wanted to do besides be a doctor. And I said, well, I'd love to just go back and live in Spain. And she said, well, look, you can either do that now or you can become a doctor and never do it. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, because, like you have to dedicate yourself, 12 years of schooling, and then you're going to come out, you're going to have debt, you're going to have to work. So maybe you could just go live in Spain when you're 40 or something like that. But, what she recommended was if there was anything that you wanted to do besides be a doctor, try it because you could
Mm,
always come back to study medicine. And,
mm,
but you couldn't stop studying medicine. Once you started, you had to finish. And so
that's right. Yeah.
that really hit home to me. And I remember going home and talking to my parents and was like, hey, mom, dad, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, realistically, I just want to go live in Spain. And so they were like, and what? And I was like, well, if I'm living in Spain, I can go to the university and continue to study Spanish. And then my
Yeah.
parents were like, okay, that's fine. And so I,
Oh, that's good. It doesn't sound like your parents were too forceful on you now.
yeah, they were like, and you know what I mean? They were very supportive. They're like, okay, that's fine. As long as they didn't want me to just go and hang out, right? As long as I
Yeah.
was studying, like you're doing something, that was fine. And so I made a U-turn in my university, dropped all my pre-med classes, switched over, was able to finish really quick, and then I moved back to Spain to do a master's in like Spanish as a second language, how to teach Spanish as a second language.
Yeah. I've actually been looking
And
at courses in that at the moment, just when I have a little downtime at work or whatever. I'm like, oh, wow, there's a lot of courses and they're pretty cheap. And that's pretty much where I'm looking at heading. And how did you go with it? I'm curious to hear because it's right what I'm looking at right now.
well, so in the United States, the university is so expensive, and so
Mm,
right, like I come from a very blue collar. You know, my dad's a construction worker, my mom was a social worker, and so a lot of decisions were based money wise. And so when I was looking at programs, all of the programs to study from a university in the United States and Spain were very expensive.
mm,
But because I already knew people in Spain, I knew housing. I could get housing taken care of. So I just
mm,
needed to find a good program that was accessible. And so again, the socialized education, there was a master's program in the Complutense, and it was, very cost was very not cheap, but you know what I mean? Like not cheap's like pejorative, right? Like it was very
mm.
inexpensive and it was really
Yeah.
accessible to me. And so that's how I ended up starting my master's program over there. And it was
Wow.
directly, again, it was like for Spanish students who had finished their bachelor's and wanted to specialize in teaching Spanish as a second language.
Hmm.
So I think for me, that master's program, what it did for me personally is it allowed me to understand how I had learned Spanish, right?
Mm,
Because I never had formally taken Spanish classes. Um, right? When I studied Spanish the first time in the university, I studied literature, right? So
mm.
you're not learning how to learn Spanish. I was just reading a bunch, and then like because you read a lot, all of a sudden you knew more Spanish. And so
That's
the
right.
Spanish as a second language program really helped me understand the learning process and what had happened for me to learn Spanish.
Mm. Okay. So now you've taken your master's, and you said you took that with relatively few students,
Yeah.
and you learned how to teach the language. So that's a LE, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's
ELE course.
Spanish. So it's Español Lengua Extranjera. So it's
That's
like the
right.
ESL programs in English. English is a second
Yep.
language, but Spanish is a second language.
Okay, wow. So you got all qualified, you love the language, fell into the teaching side of it suddenly, or at least studying the teaching side of it. What
Yeah.
happened next?
So I wanted to do my PhD in Spain
Oh,
because that would
just
allow me
kept
to
going.
stay there for longer. But then I had a hiccup because I had my bachelor's from the United States and a master's degree from Spain, and they wouldn't accept those two together because they were from different countries. They wouldn't
Yeah.
accept them for me to get into the PhD program. So I
Right.
had to either do a bachelor's program in Spain or a master's program in the United States. And so a master's program in the United States is only 2 years. And
Yeah.
it just so happened that my older brother had moved to Hawaii a few years earlier. And the
Yeah.
University of Hawaii has a master's program in Spanish literature. And
Oh,
so I applied and got accepted into the master's program at the University of Hawaii and moved out and stayed with my brother and his family for about 2.5 years and got a
okay.
master's in Spanish literature, which with my bachelor's degree then was able to get accepted into the PhD program in Spain.
Okay, so that was when you came to Hawaii.
Yeah, I'd been previously just for like 1 month, stops, but then that was the
Yeah.
first time I lived here for an extended period of time.
Wow. And then, okay, so that kind of links us back up with Dom and the body surfing. So
Yeah.
maybe let's have a little brief interval and talk about, was that when you got inspired by the sea and by body surfing and being in the ocean?
Yeah, so I mean, when I had first started coming out, so like I think '97 was the first time I came out, and I did my master's degree here in like 2001, 202,
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yep.
so I love the ocean. I grew up in the mountains, right?
Mm.
And I saw the ocean for the first time when I was like 12. And I remember
Yeah.
just playing in it and playing in it all day long. And then living out here with my brother was amazing. I mean, Hawaii's beautiful, the ocean's there. And so I started longboarding,
Okay.
and I was actually, not bad, but you've been here. Hawaii's, a lot of the waves are very steep. And
Mm.
so if it's anything more than head high,
Yeah.
I wasn't able to longboard, right? I had a 10-foot
Mm.
log and I wasn't
Right.
quick enough to make the drop and turn. And so anytime that there were waves that were a little bit bigger, I would go body surfing.
Okay.
And so that's when I really got into body surfing. And then I realized that I really just enjoyed body surfing way more than I enjoyed surfing. And so
Yeah.
I
And why
ended up,
is that? What is it
why is
about
it?
body
I think it's
surfing?
it's the
Because this
connection.
answers Dom's question. It's what does body surfing give to you? That was more or less what he asked.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say it's a connection to the ocean, right? Like when you surf, you feel the speed, right? But you feel the speed through the board, right? You stand up
Yeah.
and the speed comes through the board and you feel that. But body surfing, it's 100% connected to the ocean.
Mm.
You're feeling the power of the ocean directly on like every part of your body that's in the water. And it's just the little things, like I mean, you know, dipping your head like that or extending it the other way or palm up or palm down, like all these little changes you do when you're catching a wave, you feel that change immediately by how the water's
Mm.
flowing. So for me, body surfing just became, it's like 100% connection to the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like one thing I always find notable about that is you could go out without a hand plane and you can go out with a hand plane. And that seems fairly trivial, right? Like it's only one small thing in the
Yeah.
water, but even that alone can make such a shift in the way that everything's happening. You're relying all of a sudden mostly on your hand and that craft. Whereas when you take that out of the situation, you almost connect with the wave in a way. And I feel like the best sort of metaphor for it would be I feel like a dolphin when I'm
Yeah.
body surfing, just bare bones, nothing on the hand, just fins only. And you feel like a sea creature would feel playing in the waves as well. You really connect and you feel what that wave feels like through your body, which is
Yeah.
an amazing part about it, right?
Yeah, every once in a while, like I have hand planes and I'll use them, but it's usually just to break it. Like every once in a while, like I'll wear a hand plane today. And
Mm,
the reason that is the hand plane, you get that disconnect from because you're planing and more of your
yeah,
body's out of the water. So all of a sudden you
that's right.
lose that connectiveness that you have when you're not
Yeah,
using the hand plane.
yeah.
So, yeah. And I mean, I'm a big guy. And so, to just feel that speed, that grace, I mean, it's like you're dancing. You
It's
know what I mean?
incredible how fast you can actually move with just your body. You'd think that it would be quite limiting, but on the right type of wave, the body can move incredibly fast in the water as long
Yeah.
as you position it just right. Getting that high line, holding it down the face, and just staying in that perfect spot the whole time. Such a blissful feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so, is there anything that you've learned from the ocean or your interaction with body surfing that you carry with you now? Because I think that's what Dom was actually getting at.
Yeah. I think one of the one of the lessons I've learned with the water that stuck with me for a long time is when you start going to places, you kind of have your set time and you see the same people in the water.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was young. I was probably 21 and just off my mission, and I was visiting my brother. And I was surfing at Diamond Head, which is a spot here, and I was surfing
Mm.
like mid morning. And after a few weeks, there was a guy that I would see every morning, and he started talking to me, and he was a garbage man, and he was the happiest guy you'd ever meet. And talking to him, he was like, "Yeah, a lot of people would say my job sucks and it stinks, but I'm able to get up early. I'm able to get my job done. I'm able to get a surf in, and I'm able to pick up my kids every day from school." And
Mm.
as we're talking, he's like, there's two ways to be rich. And I was like, okay. And he's like, the first way is to make a shit ton of money. I was like,
That's
okay,
true.
that's pretty
Yeah.
obvious, straightforward.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
good method.
and then he was like, number two is to desire little. And, he's like, I desire very little. If I can get my surf in and pick up my kids from the school, I'm the wealthiest man alive. And so that stuck with me, and it stuck with me today,
Mm.
right? Because, you know, how much of our time do we consuming, right? Because
Mm.
money ends up being, like you changing time for money so that you can do stuff with your money. But if you did less stuff with your money, you could actually have a lot more time. And so, which is more
Wow.
valuable.
Wow. So how much time do we spend? How much time do we consume consuming? And another way to get rich is to desire little.
Yeah.
Wow. And you just learned that, me and this guy out in the surf just got to
Just talking
chatting.
with the guy in between waves at surf. But it's something, it's stuck with me still today. Right. And I lived in Peru for a year. And when I was
Oh,
living in
really?
Lima, yeah, I was living in Lima. I took a sabbatical from my PhD to go study
Okay.
Peruvian poetry. So I was living in
Oh,
Lima, studying Peruvian poetry, and I realized that I needed $115 to live on a
yeah.
month,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I need 115. That covers
That's
food and my rent for the month, and
wow.
um, so I actually was teaching English classes, and I had uh, a professor at the university who was willing to pay me $25 an hour
Hmm.
to teach like a conversational English course. And so I was like, man, if I teach 5 hours a month, I can cover my needs. And so why work six, right? And so I would
Wait.
work five
Five
hours a month.
hours on how? Where were you teaching that? Online or in the
No,
class?
in person, in person. So
In
I had
person.
5 hours. I would teach in person, like basically a class a week to the same guy for conversational
Yeah.
English,
And he'd pay you in
and
US dollars.
he would pay me in soles, and then I had
Oh,
enough to
it's all.
live for the month, and so it was that
Oh,
constant. But there was that like issue. Like I could live a lot different in Peru, and I could spend more money, but the less money I spend, the less time I have to work, and then the less work I have to do, the more time I have to, invest in my own projects, right? So I was writing a lot
yeah.
at the time. I was reading a ton and also surfing a bunch. So, and that stuck
Okay.
with me. Like, the more you consume, the more money you need, the more of your time you have to change to make that money.
That's true. So you've piqued my curiosity now because one thing that you mentioned, and this is something that I had written on my board here. I actually just got rid of it recently, but um, you talked about having more time to dedicate to your personal pursuits, and that became something that was quite important to you. And the reason I'm asking about it is because I also am someone who likes to go down those rabbit holes of many different things, and I love all of them equally, and I just want to have more time for them because they bring me so much simple joy doing them. Just doing those things, I get more joy that can carry me through every single day of my life. And um, I like that you said it, but I'm curious as to why that's so important to you.
Um, it's important. Like, there's many reasons, right? Like politically, philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it, like it's play, right? Body surfing,
Mm-hmm.
it's play. It's
Mm,
useless for them, right? But it's
mm,
not for my. You know what I mean? Like you're investing in something that brings you value, brings you worth, but it's not valued by society or by the system, right? It's kind of like
mm,
poetry, right?
mm.
Um, it's my dad's a construction worker, so he always says that I chose the two most useless things in the world and I made them my PhD, which was philosophy and poetry. And realistically, like they're 2 degrees that the ROI on them is not the best if you're like a business. You know what I mean? If you're thinking, there's not a
Yeah,
lot of
from
ads
the
in the newspaper for a poet or yeah, we need a philosopher, right? But they bring a lot of self worth, right? And
yeah.
so, just to sit and read a good book is so fulfilling. if you
Yeah.
can do it, right?
If you can make the time to do it.
If you can make the time to do it. And so for me, that's, I think, the reason why the time comes into play, because, you know, you have to have time to pursue those passions, right?
Mm.
Um, I, okay, I'm going to get a little scholarly on you, but Henry David
Let's
Thoreau.
get scholarly.
Henry David Thoreau is an American writer, right?
I love
And
Thoreau.
he wrote Walden. And one of the
Yes.
things that I took
Great
away
book.
from Walden, I actually read Walden when I was in Peru. So it's one of the books that fell in my lap and I read again. I'd read parts of it before, but I read it there. And so we already know I'm worried about time and this. And Walden
Yeah.
has a meetup with a fellow in Boston. And Walden does a calculation of how much it would cost him to buy the train ticket to get to Boston to get to his meeting. And then he does a cost valuation of how much, like, crops he would have to sell to make that money, how much time it would take him to grow those crops. And then basically figured out that it was less expensive for him to leave 4 days before the meeting and walk to Boston than to use time to produce stuff to make money to be able to buy the ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just chose to use his time instead of his money.
So he invested his time in something else and then took 4 days to walk to the meeting instead of taking the train.
Wow. And having read that metaphor, how do you carry that metaphor into your life? Has that become relevant for you, or have you reflected on it and used it at a certain time?
Yeah. So I think, going back to, whatever to desire little, you know what I mean? When I was living in Spain, I was able to do it because I wasn't living, a very fabulous lifestyle. I wasn't spending tons of money because I didn't have a lot of money, right? And so, but I was having a lot of fun, and but like if I wanted, so maybe I could have traveled more, but I didn't, because like if I needed to travel more, I needed more money. Oh, and I guess the other thing is so I was an illegal alien in Spain. Like I didn't have papers, and basically what I figured out is,
do we need to cut that or something? We don't need. You don't need to
I'm
cancel
fine with
your
that.
PhD or something, are they?
No. I'm very proud that I was. And I'm not. I was undocumented, because illegal alien, right, is a term we should not use, because nobody's illegal, right? So I was undocumented, and basically what I figured out is, for me to get a visa, I would have to pay for a trip to LA to go to the consulate, and then I would have to pay insurance in the United States that covered me in Spain, which was very expensive. And so I just did, I figured that I could, live in Spain. And if I left the European Union every 3 months, more or less, then my time in the European Union was renewed. And so I would do things like go down to southern Spain and take a ferry into Morocco. And, we used to laugh because I would cross over in the morning and I would eat. There's a restaurant I like to eat at, and then I would take a nap in a park, and then I would get back on the ferry and go back into Spain. And that's how I was able to somewhat skirt the immigration laws in Spain.
Wow. So for you, there was you could instantly turn over your visa at that time, because I feel like nowadays it's something along the lines, there's like a Schengen visa and you can have 90 days every 180 days, which was, I would have done exactly what you did, except that this new term exists now.
Yeah. So like now it would be a lot harder to do what I did. And then because things have changed, and before, like sometimes I felt like Spain just didn't care. Because I had an American passport, I'm white. And so like that kind of stuff, it shouldn't, but they let you go through more often than not. The one thing I did that was my cousin worked for the airlines. And so he could always book me a flight that he could later cancel at no cost. And so anytime I left the country and was coming back in, I always had a flight date that
Uh-huh.
said I was going to leave the country.
Yeah.
But then, then my cousin would cancel it, and I would just stay. And
Yeah, it's
so,
funny. That's still a thing these days. You can there's a lot of things. One that I use is called Onward Ticket or Onward Bound or something like that. And it you just buy it online, costs like $15. Whoever was clever enough to make that,
oh,
$15 off tickets that go nowhere. And
yeah.
you can use those tickets to enter
Oh,
countries,
okay.
and it's as legit as anything, but you're just not going to use it. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a little side thing you can do if you need something for a visa. Anyone listening?
Yeah.
Um, and wow, okay, so my brain won't let me let go of talking about poetry with you for a little bit because it wasn't necessarily on our plan of things to talk about. But when you talked about poetry, that was your something that made you kind of glimmer, and I could tell you were quite proud of it. And obviously, you followed that route into your scholarship, and um, you did it in Peru. So I think that's kind of fascinating. So you went to study Peruvian philosophy, no, Peruvian poetry as a sabbatical year. What drew you to Peru, apart from that it was so cheap, and why poetry and why Peruvian poetry?
So, I think that when I started, because I was studying, when I was studying literature, like
Mm,
novels are big, novels can be very thick and chapters can be very long. And when you're reading in your second language, you can really get bogged down
and tired
in
quickly.
reading these long chapters. And so early on, poetry just was really fun to read because a lot of times the poems, it can be 2 lines, it can be 3 lines, or it could be just a few pages. And, as a second language learner reading in Spanish, I felt like I was accomplishing things because, like I read 15 poems, right? It could be 15 pages, but, I read 15 poems.
Mm,
And so I really started just getting drawn to the poetry. So when I did my PhD was in like Spanish and Latin American poetry and
mm-hmm.
like kind of philosophy, how the relationship between the two, poetry and philosophy. And so how I ended up getting to Peru was the other thing that happened is I played rugby in Spain. And
Oh, okay.
so, and that was like, I got picked up on scholarship. And so I played for the uni. And then I was kind of playing like at a semi pro level. And
Mm.
so basically, they would pay for my schooling and room if I played rugby. And so,
Oh,
yeah, so it was awesome. I could, play rugby and then read poetry. And, that's all I had to do. So when I was in my PhD program in Spain, one of my fellow students, his name's Ruben Quiroz. He's from Peru. And so I'd been back. I'd been living in Spain for like continual, like 4 years, but I kind
mm.
of had plateaued. I thought I was kind of too comfortable. Right. And
Ah,
so there was always this thing about like when you're uncomfortable in new situations, you learn a lot more. And so I
yeah.
kind of was feeling that I was plateauing because I was too comfortable. And so I was looking at two options. One would be to move to Argentina and play rugby because I had
Mm,
some, like I had the opportunity to go and hook up with some Argentinian clubs that would allow, like help me out, live in there and
mm-hmm.
play.
Yep.
Um, and then there was Ruben who lived in Lima who was like, yeah, come, like we'll figure it out. And so Argentina just seemed very too much like Europe,
Mm,
whereas Peru was going to be like completely new. And so I decided on Peru and I moved out. And Ruben he's a professor now at the University of San Marcos in Peru,
okay.
which is the oldest university in all of the Americas.
Oh, really?
And he's an amazing poet and he's an amazing philosopher. And he allowed me to stay with him for a few months to get situated till I could find a place. And he introduced me to a bunch of his friends that were all poets. And so it was my time in Peru was like the bohemian life of just hanging out and talking poetry with, poets. And um,
I'm
he
not sure
taught me
why, but
something. What?
I'm not sure why, but this when you said that, this image comes to my head when you make friends with a bunch of poets. It's just everyone talking in like romantic enigmas to each other all the time.
Just everybody rhyming all the time, and yeah,
yeah, yeah, like a very softly spoken rap group.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, Ruben, that was the first time. Okay, so I had started writing poetry in Spanish when I was living in Spain, right?
Okay.
Because you're studying it, and so then it's a new language, and so there's that like you can play with it. There's no binds because like hey, I don't even know the grammar rules, so it doesn't matter how I write. Like I can do whatever I want, right? And so
Yeah.
I started writing poetry in Spanish when I was living in Spain, and when I moved to Peru, Ruben knew that I wrote, but at that time I wasn't sharing. Like I wouldn't share with people because it was like, you're like, I don't know, like is it good? Is it, like whatever. And so one day, Ruben kind of sat me down and he's like, "You're selfish." I was like, "What?" He's like, "You're selfish." And I'm like, "Man, where's this coming from?" And he's like, "I know you write, but you never share your poems with me. So, and that way you're selfish. If you write, you have to share, or you're a selfish person." And I was like, "Oh man." And so,
Wow.
but it's true, right? Like if you, like let's say, I mean, we can call it a gift, right? Or, I mean, like you could be a painter and paint amazing paintings, but if you never showed them to anybody, right?
Hmm.
Like what's
Wow,
the point?
that one really got me. That one. That's quite profound. The if you're a writer or if you create something, basically, to break it down smaller, you must share it or you're selfish is the angle
Yeah,
he was going for. And that's one thing I realized some years ago was like we're all such creative beings, and if you just create and keep it to yourself, like it doesn't, there's no point. Like that idea, that beautiful glimmer, that moment that arrived at you and you made, it should be shared. I think it should be shared so that people can see it and people can be inspired by it. Maybe it influences their ideas and how they move through the world. You never know who it's going to impact. And for
yeah,
that reason alone, as a basic one, let alone nothing to do with financial things or anything like that, but just the beauty of sharing creation with one another.
yeah. Well, and so like when he talked to me, and then I left, and I was thinking about it, like all of the music you listen to. Imagine if they did not put it out, or all the poetry, like all the books that I was reading and like having like these amazing experiences with, if they would have decided that, oh, I just write for myself, I would have never been
Oh,
able to read their books, right? And so
yeah,
then you
true.
think about it, like as an artist, yeah, you do, art is done for yourself, right? But
Mm,
then there's that second part where you share it, and it can help people, it can inspire people, it can influence people, right? Or
right.
people can have a good time reading, have a good experience reading or listening to or looking at what you've created. And so,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to be selfish. And so in Peru, I actually was able to publish my first like little plaqueta
Oh,
in
yes?
Spanish, plaquette. So it's like a small, tiny um, poetry book that Ruben actually introduced me to one of his editors, and she read my
Yeah.
stuff and decided to publish it. And it's funny because the book's called A Madrid. So
Ah.
if you think Madrid and then you
Yes.
put an A in front of it, it would be
To
like to
Madrid.
Madrid. But then AMAR is to love, right?
Yeah.
So then you have this love, and then ID, which would be at the end of that, is Eid, which is to go. So it's kind of like it was like love Madrid, but then leave Madrid. And so I see it as
Wow.
the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
Okay, Under a Bridge, their
Yes.
song, and it's basically a love song to LA. If,
To LA.
yeah, to Los
Oh,
Angeles.
yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so basically, A Madrid is like my love poem to Madrid.
Oh, it's a
And
city.
so that was published in Peru. And then, since then,
Wow.
I've continued to write and been lucky enough to have stuff printed. And
Hey, where can I pick up a copy of that?
I'll send one to you in the mail.
Amazing. What I might do, if it's okay with you, I might buy a couple extra off you, and and give a few away to our guests who listen to this episode.
Okay. I'll send you copies of my work, and I'll send
Oh,
extra
yes?
ones. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
the latest stuff that I published, been publishing with publishing house in England, and it's nonprofit, like it's not for profit. You know, art
yeah.
should be valued on art itself, not on the money it makes. And so,
Uh-huh.
um, I donate my work, and they donate their time, and it gets, it sells for cost, right? So neither them nor me make money, which makes my mom really mad. She always feels like, what if your book sells a million
Yeah,
copies? I'm like, it's
yeah.
poetry, mom. It's not going to sell a million copies.
She's
So
like, Zach, first you gave up being a doctor, now you gave up profitable career, now you're not selling your books you make. Come
yeah, and
on, man.
she always brings up Harry Potter. You know how much money she made writing Harry Potter? And I'm like, yeah, mom, Harry Potter is a novel. It's amazing. I write poetry, which is obscure, and if I sold it for profit, I'd make $100, right? So I'd rather not have $100, and the
Yeah,
principle of I didn't make any money on this. So
yeah.
I'll
But there's
make
something
sure you get
beautiful
some
in
books.
just there's something beautiful in just sharing creation for free as well. But like that's not to say that in certain circumstances that it's not a bad thing to get remunerated for it as well,
Oh no, no,
because
no, no.
of all the time and effort you put in. And actually you have captured like a glimmer of thought and creation and turned it in from a non-physical thing into a physical interactive thing. And I think that is really special, and that's what should be rewarded.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that I'm very fortunate that um, I was able to get my PhD, and I'm a working teacher, and
Mm,
so I'm able, like, I make it to the end of every month on what I make as a teacher, and so
mm,
I don't feel the need to make any money off of my art.
right.
But if
So
like, I know there's artists that need to make money off their art to live, which
yeah,
I fully, support. But I feel like I'm in a very privileged situation where, I have another job that I really like to do,
yeah, yeah,
and it pays the bills for the most part, and then my art can just be what I want it to be, and I don't have to worry
wow,
about writing if I don't want to write, because if I don't write,
yeah,
nobody's pressing me, and if I
right.
do write, but then I also feel like I have 100% control over what I'm doing, because
That's
I
right.
don't need to respond to anybody.
So it's cool. You've taken away the obligation to create and just left it as a personal, fun, enjoyable experience. And then you share that. And then some people around you enjoy that. And that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean,
Okay.
but then at the same time, I always say that, like, poetry for me is that place I can go to work through stuff that I can't work through
Yes.
in the normal realm, right? And
Yes.
so it's kind of, and I would say the same thing about body surfing. It's that space I can go to when I need to work something out that I'm not able to work out in other spaces.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So I feel like creative things and natural or in nature things are the two things that come up. And I think most people could relate with you on that when you're doing something creative that is uniquely yours and you're out in nature, be it walking in a park or going surfing at the beach, you typically tend to feel really good or at least release or process some things that you're either going through or struggling with. I always find when you do any of that, it makes you feel better. One other thing I'm thinking right away when you said that was to do with how you use your creative space as a processing space. And I noted it with Spanish some time ago. A long time ago, I had trouble crying. I couldn't cry for some reason. I held it all back. And it wasn't until I got to speak in Spanish and sing, more so sing in Spanish, sing and play guitar, the like flamenco style,
Oh,
that I was
okay.
able to talk about things openly in a space that no one could understand around me, but I could say whatever I wanted. I remember
Yeah.
this one particular time I was at Ayers Rock, or sorry, it's called Uluru, in the center of Australia, And I remember singing and just breaking out in tears about all this stuff. And everyone was like, "Oh, what did you say? It was so beautiful." And I was like, "Oh, it's just my own thing, really." But it allowed me to release those words and those feelings and the tears even from my face, like. And in that moment, I realized just how important creative or things that you love like that can be.
Yeah. And this, so I didn't write poetry in English. Like, growing up, I didn't write poetry, but it was the language, it was Spanish that actually freed me of whatever blocks I had in English to be able to explore, writing poetry. It was Spanish that allowed me to feel like I could, you know, write about my feelings and right. I wasn't doing it in English. It
Wow.
was actually very hard for me to actually start writing poems in English because um, it's the English language. I had never used it for that before in my life.
Mm.
And so actually the first I wrote a poem to my father in English, which I mean makes sense. But my parents, like nobody in my family speaks Spanish, right? And
Uh-huh.
so there was one day I was my dad because he was in construction. I was in this church and it had open beams, and this poem came to me and it was in English. But it was the only thing I'd ever written in English. And then about so I think it's 14 years ago I finished my PhD, and then 12 years ago we moved to Hawaii. And when we
Mm.
moved here, um, I took a job. I took a job specifically as an exterminator, so I could be on island. Um, so
Okay.
I was working doing termite, exterminating termites, and it was going to be a 5 month job, but it allowed my wife. My wife's from Spain. We met in Spain, got married over there. But
Uh-huh.
it allowed her to come to Hawaii with me and like experience Hawaii before we moved on. And I got a job at any, like somewhere, right, in academia. And
Yeah.
so while I was working as an exterminator, it's really hot and you're spraying these chemicals and you're sweating. And I started writing a book about poems about termites. But at that moment, I couldn't write them directly in English. And so I found myself writing the poems in Spanish and then reworking them in English
Yeah.
so that they could
Yeah.
like have their own space. So they're not translations, right? Like I'm not translating, but I worked the
Yeah.
poems in both languages. And that really was the first time that I was able to write, like I was able to get in and write into English. And then I guess
Wow.
over the last 12 years, I finally feel comfortable writing in English. And so now, over the last little while, like a lot of my writing is all in English.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
still write some Spanish, but I mean, I do write majority of my stuff now is in English.
Oh, wow. And I find that fascinating that it was actually having less vocabulary and less language that helped you to begin writing rather than having lots and, like a critical skills in thinking in that language and stuff. Like to go and like to start with having less is kind of artistic in itself, to be
But
honest.
yeah, but you have less rules, right? Like you grow up
Mm.
and you're learning, and so I felt like it was a lot more playful the second language, but then
Mm.
in Spanish. But then the other thing I realized is like you knew one way to say something, but then it was fun for me to figure out other ways to say what I was trying to say. Like, oh, how could I? Like I want fireworks,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Fuegos artificiales, right?
Yeah.
Fireworks. Oh, like has anybody ever referred to them as burning stars? Right. And so then like all of a sudden, like in Spanish, you're writing and you're like, I want to talk about the fireworks, but I'm gonna call them, you know, the burnt stars, right? And so, like, in English, like I'm saying it right now, it seems really weird, but like in Spanish, because of that, like it was just really playful, and
Yeah.
I didn't feel like there was anything holding me back, and so
Yeah.
I allowed myself that space. That I think that's what happens is a lot of times in our native language we don't allow ourselves that creative space.
Yeah,
that space to play with whatever the medium is, right?
that's true. Because one of guy I take classes off, he experiments with that sometimes. The art of intentionally taking away rules or creating rules that mean you can't use your normal rules while he's making things,
Yeah,
and just seeing what he can do when the typical rules don't exist. And it's crazy what can come out of it. Actually, I like
yeah,
that what you said about how we do have just too many rules, and because of that we're kind of constricted to certain ideas and beliefs and ways of creating. I think that one there is a real point for reflection for me, which I'm sure I'll process more later. That's amazing. I didn't know that the poetry part was going to be there, and I'm excited. I will accept your offer of some pieces of your work. I'd love to read it, especially the Spanish work as well, because I love Spanish. But happy for you to accept whatever you send over. Um, and that's it. That's amazing. So poetry became a big part of your life. Your church, I want to call it like a divine moment, sent you over on mission to a place you weren't expecting to go. And we talk about this a lot on the show, how you never really see life coming. You think you've got these ideas and plans, but then all of a sudden you're in one place and it takes you this whole other direction, and that's where the magic really starts to unfold. And you never see it coming, and you end up in Spain. You fall in love with Madrid. You try and live there at all costs, give up your medical path that you were going on and dive into the things you love, poetry and Spanish and being with Spanish people, being in Madrid. Move to Peru on sabbatical, and then sort of practice your poetry there, and that leads you into, well, I mean, that's what your career is now. You're a teacher and a like of philosophy and poetry as a professor, right?
yeah. So I mean, I haven't really gone the normal path, right? Because I'm still an adjunct. Does that term? Do you guys have adjunct professors in? So
I'm not
it's
really
like I
sure what
don't
that
have a
means.
full time contract. I'm
Okay.
like part time, but then I teach full time hours, and so then they have to recognize me as a full time professor.
Ah,
So it's
okay.
kind of like it's the best, or it's a worst case scenario as a professor, but I'm actually like I think it's like the best case scenario for me right now. Um,
Okay.
and so like things are good. I mean I came over here. I was working as an exterminator. I put out my CV. I was applying for jobs on the mainland. Um,
Mhm.
and then I got offered one course at a university here, so I was part-time exterminating, part-time professor, like teacher. And then I did that for a few years, and then probably 4 years in, so maybe 8 years ago, I had enough work at the universities that I was able to stop moonlighting as an exterminator, which was a good thing. I was happy.
Okay, so you strike me as someone who's making choices that suit, the best version of your life, that allows you to practice your crafts and your arts and to live where you want to be. It sounds like Hawaii kept you once you got there. I feel like quite similar with it as well. Like I remember thinking about it flying in once and feeling like I was home in a weird way, even though I'd only been a couple of times. It's such a beautiful place. So you're working as a professor now. One thing I wanted to ask you about was you met your partner in Spain and you moved out to Hawaii, and now you've got a family that's bilingual. And that's something that I always thought was really cool and felt like something that always fascinated me quite a lot. And I wonder what it's like to have a partner that speaks a different language and also raise your children in two languages.
Yeah, so I mean, um, I met my wife. My wife's Spanish, and I met her in Spain. And by that time, I met her after I'd been in Spain for like 10 years. And so at that
Yeah,
time, Spanish was the same, the same to me as English. And so
right?
because I met my wife in Spanish, that's the language we use. And
Yeah.
so I feel weird when I talk to my wife in English because
Oh,
it's like we're role playing or something because you
yeah.
know we just met in Spain, we met in Spanish, and so I really enjoy that she speaks Spanish, and that keeps me speaking Spanish all the time. And so in our house, We have two little girls. They're 8 and 6, and since they were born, so I speak probably 90% of the time to my wife in Spanish.
Mm.
That's, every once in a while we throw in some English, but most of our talk amongst ourselves is in Spanish. And so the
Yeah.
girls grew up with that. But then my wife probably does 80% Spanish to the girls and 20% English. And then I'm the opposite. I speak mostly, like 80% English to my girls and 20% Spanish. And so um, I just love having the two languages in the house. I
Mm.
mean, it's just amazing when little kids are learning, like they don't differentiate between languages. And
Oh,
so when early on with my daughter, you wonder because like you're in Hawaii, English is the dominant language, and so there's not a lot of chances outside of the household for my daughters to use Spanish. So sometimes you wonder how much is sticking, right? And
mm.
when my daughter was probably 3, we were going on these long walks, and for her, she just thought she had like this like a big vocabulary because she
Yeah.
knew 2 or 3 words for everything, but that
Yeah.
was like car and coche. It wasn't Spanish and English. It was just this is you can call this or you can call this that or like the colors. She would say, "Oh, red," or you can say rojo, right? And so for her, it wasn't there was a difference. It was just like she had this language that had multiple ways to say all the different words.
Oh, wow.
And so like also as like a nerd academic like language learner but also a professor, like you can see that whole process happening in your children in the house, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So like I mean my wife's family still lives in Spain, and we try to visit most in the summer. We try to go
Uh-huh.
every summer if we can, and for me it's
Yeah.
just amazing to show up and 3 weeks later we're leaving, and you're there, Spanish, so like all of a sudden your daughters are using subjunctive future clauses and you're like, whoa, where does that come from? Just
So
because like
you're
the Spanish
watching.
is in there and then they're talking to their grandma, and they're just
Wow.
making leaps and bounds.
Wow.
And
So you're
so
watching language acquisition into languages happen just in your household and on travels and seeing them pick up all these things just by being in there and learning it.
yeah.
Wow,
But then
that's
it's
really
also
special.
funny because I think that there's times where I feel like my daughters are like the only 2 people in Hawaii that speak this weird language because they have English, they have Spanish, and then they're picking up like some of the pidgin, right? So it's like my daughter will say
Oh yeah.
anytime like the phone rings or like beeps, my daughter always asks who scribe, right? Who escribe, right? And so like this, it's this strange dialect that happens in the household with a lot of these funny little phrases that they're because they're also like because
So
language
it's
is
a blend
alive,
of
right?
like
So you tell them something, but then they change
Hawaiian
it.
pigeon.
Yeah,
Is it like a blend of Hawaiian pigeon and Spanish?
yeah, and then like more formal English, but then they also create things, right? Um,
Yeah.
so they just like their thinking is like, oh, in Spanish this is this, and so they're like creating their own words because that's what they think it would be, right? So they're
Oh
concepts
wow.
that you would never use in Spain, but because they're just following like their reasoning, they're creating these words for things that like
Yeah.
are in Spanish but don't really exist in Spanish, which is really fun.
Wow. This feels like more fuel for the poetry.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wish I
It's got all
had
of
the
these like.
creativity.
Wow. Okay, that's really amazing. I feel really warm hearing that because it's something I've been curious about for a really long time, and I just think that's really special. Um, we got onto a whole different topic then, but it kind of fit perfectly into what we were talking about anyway. We're moving into the second part of the show now, where we sort of dive a little bit more into your mentors and, fortunately enough, philosophy. Wasn't fully, I didn't even think I knew that you were a philosophy professor. I just assumed you were a Spanish professor. So this part of the show I'm feeling excited about as well. So do you need a little break or anything before we carry on, or are you happy to keep going?
Oh, we can keep going.
Sure. All right, let's carry on. So, first question: who are your mentors and idols, and why do you look up to them so much? How'd they shape who you are?
So it's a tough question, right? So I would first and foremost say my parents,
Mm.
because right, like they're that living example of you know of what to do, right? Um, I think what strikes me most about my parents is neither one of them came from the best households. There were
Mm-hmm.
some, I mean, we can say there were some major issues in both of their households when they were growing up. And one of the first things that they decided when they were going to get married is that, you know, they could create the family that they wanted, right?
Yeah.
So things that had happened and their family did not need to continue to happen going forward. They could create the family and the family structure and everything that goes along with that, fresh and new. And
Mm.
my mom was a social worker, and a lot of times she says that she studied psychology and social work to first understand everything that had happened to her and why she was who she was. And then
Mm.
once she understood that, then she could move forward. And so I just am, I would say they're my mentors and my idols. I think they're an example of what parents should be. I see them as they always. I mean, times were tough. You know what I mean? Um, Construction. Sometimes there's no work, and
Mm.
sometimes they struggled. But my parents always sacrificed for us. I have two brothers, and my parents always sacrificed so that we could, you know, follow our dreams and do what we wanted to do. And I
Mm.
think that is one of the main reasons I didn't think twice about just like, hey, I'm moving to Spain and I'm living in Spain, because I knew there was always a safety net for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always knew that whatever happened, I always knew I had a place I could go home to. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's easier to dream and, to try to soar when there's a safety net. And so I
I
would
agree.
really, like my parents and were are great examples still. And
Mm.
yeah. And I think as a parent today, like me, you know, I look at what they did and I just want to be able to make it easier, like set my kids up so that they're in a better spot to chase their passions, chase their dreams than I was.
Mm.
And that's exactly what my parents did, is they put me in a better spot so that I could chase my dreams
Yeah.
than they were.
So, what are some things you do to try and set you girls up with that kind of situation?
I mean, one that there's the financial, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
the nitty gritty
Mm-hmm.
dollar, you know what I mean. Like there's that kind of stuff that you need to have. Like, I mean, Maslow's basic needs, right? You gotta meet the
Yes.
basic needs first. If you're hungry, you're not dreaming, right? So there's that. But I also the the biggest part I think is just support and love, right?
Mm.
Um, I feel that from my parents, that they always supported me. That what I mean. Like I told them, I I'm not going to be a doctor, and they're like, "That's great. Like, what do you want to do? We'll
Yeah.
support you in that, right?" And so,
Yeah.
I mean, my daughters are young still, but just that they are growing up knowing that they're supported and that they're loved,
Mm.
and
Mm.
whatever they want to pursue. I mean, obviously, if it's good, right? Like
Yeah.
we're gonna be there for them, and even if
Yeah.
you go through some rough patches and maybe mess up and stuff, that we're still there, right? So
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing we do is we let them know that they can do whatever they can be, whatever they want to be, right?
Yeah. 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 I like that message too. And it's when you said that about your parents just letting you go and change that path for you. Now, with the retrospect, if we've just been listening to your story, you hear where you ended up and obviously how joyous all of these things make you. I'm all for it. I think it seems to me like just the right thing to do. Um, So apart from your parents, then who else? Because I know you
So
mentioned Thoreau and there's some books and things as
Thoreau,
well. But
one of the I say one of the pivotal people in my thinking is Miguel de Unamuno. He's a Spanish philosopher from the end
okay.
of the 20th century, so like 1898. No, yeah, that would be 19th century, early 20th century. He's a writer, but one of the things with Spain is Spain's not known for its philosophers, but a lot of their
Mm.
writers had wrote very philosophical works, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so Miguel de Unamuno, he's he has poems that are like the prayer of the atheist,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds kind of contradicting, right? Why, if you're
Yeah.
an atheist, why do you pray, right?
Mm.
Um, and so one of the so if we think back my story, I was a missionary, right? And so there's that religious thing, but then there's always that constant battle, right, between reason and faith,
Mm.
and it kind of plays into like my big thing with poetry is the battle between heart and head, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's reason and love, right? Like they're contradicting the reason and faith. And so
Yeah.
Unamuno in a lot of his works deals with this topic of, you know, believing but not believing,
Mm-hmm.
and how, like, rationally, how can you come to terms with beliefs that may seem unrational? And
Mm.
then, right, like, yeah, because like faith and reason, they're a lot of times they're contradicting, right? And
Mm.
so for me, that was a big thing personally for me that echoed with Unamuno's work. He
What
always
did it
referred
help you to understand?
well. So there's he always, and I'm not like a scriptorian, right? I always forget the scriptures,
Uh-huh.
but there's a scripture, and one of the apostles is no, I don't know if it's an apostle, but somebody comes to Jesus and he says, "I believe, but help me in my unbelief." And
Mm-hmm.
so basically to get to the point where you're comfortable and you're accepting that you can believe but not fully believe, but that's fine. Like, um, sometimes I use the metaphor of it's okay to be lost,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't always
Mm.
need to know where you are at all times. It's okay to be
Yeah.
lost as long as you continue to move, right? Because through
Mm.
that movement, you'll be found.
It it makes me reflect on something I was just thinking about this morning, and it's sometimes you kind of veer off the path you think you should be on momentarily, but it's weird how you find things down that path that are actually end up being kind of essential to your main path. And you kind of like, oh, I didn't really like this path, but I'm glad I saw this down here. And you wander back and you're on your path again with that new learning or that new piece of equipment or whatever it is that's helping you on your way, a new tool. And and I think that's really special. And that's what that made me think of right away.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and then I mean, I like Alberto Camus, the French existentialist.
Okay.
Existentialism, I think, is really big. I mean, it's really important to understand. You
Mm-hmm.
know, try to understand why we exist, like why morally why we're here, and you know um,
What's
that kind of.
what sort of theories does he propose roughly?
So he wrote the book The Stranger, and so um, it's so existential. A lot of it is to deal like how do you deal with the situation you're in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And try to understand and accept it, and then
Mm-hmm.
make the best of it.
Yeah. Make the most out of what you got. Work with what you
Yeah,
got all the time.
and
So
then I
that's what
guess
you
the
took
other. Oh, oh,
from
go.
him.
What?
That's what you took from him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And one more you have.
Well, I would just say the. So this, I mean, this is also kind of contradictory, but
think the best things are?
Anarchism is
Okay.
very, very, like, I consider myself an anarchist.
This feels like it fits really well with your Spanish grunge block in Madrid sort of phase.
100%. I mean, I I listened to Rage Against the Machine before
Gonna
I moved to
say,
Spain, but
yeah,
there's because of the Spanish Civil War, which was so recent when you think
uh-huh.
about it in a timeline.
Yeah,
Like
truly.
when I arrived to Spain, there were people who had lived and suffered through the Spanish Civil War, and
Mm.
politically, people were very charged still and
Mm.
still today, because I mean there
Yeah.
was the three fraction. You know, what I mean, you had the fascism with Franco, you had the communism coming in, you had the anarchists, and so it was very easy to have political conversations with people of my age, like young 20 year olds that had studied, you know,
Mm.
and studied communism, had studied anarchism, and right. That's one of the, I guess, one of the other things I loved about Spain was the conversations that I was having with my peers
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
politics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's a very rich history of anarchism in Spain
Yeah.
with, and I I really enjoy what it teaches.
So, what is anarchism, and what does it mean to be an anarchist?
So a lot of, I mean, the funny thing is most people just think, oh, chaos, disorder, right?
Yeah, you're
But
drawing like pentagrams on the wall and stuff,
yeah,
and
like the
red
A with the
paint.
circle around it,
The A,
like
that's right, not the pentagram, the A, of
the
course. Yeah.
A and the circle, or
Yeah.
um, so for me, right? Um, Anarchy is, it's power structures, right?
Hmm.
So we have vertical power structures and we have horizontal power structures. Um,
Okay.
Vertical power structures is a lot of the power structures that we see in society, right? Where
Hmm.
somebody or some things above you telling you what you should do because they're the authority, right?
Yeah.
That's a vertical power structure. Anarchy would, would do away with the vertical power structures and try to form horizontal power structures, which is a
Okay.
shared power with your peers, with your community, right? And
Mm.
decisions are made based on agreement amongst the community instead of
Mm.
somebody outside of the community telling you what should be done.
So it almost sounds to me like democracy, but without a lead in a weird way. Like
Like
it's
true
like a flat
democracy.
democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
without,
That makes
I
sense.
mean, like true democracy where, and a lot of it on the macro is hard to, like you can't like think about it on the macro. You got to think about it on like the micro, like in your neighborhood, in your community, where there's
Yeah.
an issue and everybody comes together and, amongst the community, you come up with the best solution,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is what democracy is, right?
Mm.
Right.
So would
Not,
you say that this is your main philosophy in life?
yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I'm a Mormon anarchist, right? Those are, because that's the thing. Like that's why I say it's really contradictory. Because I mean, one of the big slogans is "No God, no King," right? Of
Yeah.
anarchy, right? There's
Yeah.
no, so like how do you reconcile that vertical power structure, right?
Yeah.
That's always been there in institutional religions with
Yeah.
a strong belief in anarchy. And um, I, feel that I've been able to do it because I don't believe that there's a vertical power structure between me and, if we want to call them God or, our heavenly fathers or whatever you want to call them, right? I
Hmm.
believe that it's a parallel, like we're working together,
Existing within it.
existing with it at the same
Yes.
level, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's something that I've sort of, if I'm on the right track here, I feel like that's something that I've kind of thought and felt as well. It feels like, you know, yourself, everything around you, and everything you can see, it's all part of one thing is kind of the route that I go down with that sort of stuff. And it seems like there's some parallels to be drawn between that for sure. And it's kind of interesting. It's like, it fits really well actually with the treat others as you'd treat yourself. Because if
Yeah.
everything's one thing and everything's parallel and we're existing as like a whole, then if any action has its reaction, there's two sides. I think of yin and yang right now, like you need the dark and the light. And it sounds like most of the time we're really just walking a line between the two and trying to sort of like keep an arm in both sides, like, so I find that quite, I think most things are balance. No,
Yeah.
most things are walking that line. Everything is contradictory. And I feel like when you go too far one direction, people get kind of nuts
Yeah.
in a way.
Well, and you
Yeah.
said do under the golden rule, do unto others as you'd like to be done, right?
Mm.
Um, there's also the concept that your rights begin where your rights end, where other rights begin, right?
Ah, yeah.
And so, like right? And so, if you think about it that way, then it changes your perspective on your interactions with people, right?
Yes.
Because yes, you do have the right? You can, and it may be good, but how does it affect someone else, right? If you
Mm.
doing that's going to harm someone else, or it's going to take away their right to experience, freedom, then you have to curtail that, right? Because like just because I have freedom doesn't mean I should limit the freedom of anybody else. Everybody
Yeah.
should have the same amount, should have full freedom to do what they desire to do.
That's right. The thing is, the desires clash sometimes, don't they?
Yes. But that's where the control comes in, and you have to realize that your desires do not, there's no reason why your desires should supersede or take precedence over somebody else's desires, right? So treat
Mm.
others as you would like to be treated, but also know that, your rights end where somebody else's rights begin.
Mm. It's very much so live and let live, isn't it?
Live and let live. But I think as you take it into like a community and into the neighborhood, right? Like something that is best for the neighborhood may not be the best for you personally. And so
Ah,
you
true.
start losing, there's a loss, or there's a giving away of personal
Mm.
freedom for the collective freedom,
Mm.
right?
I think
So I think
sometimes
it
people.
changes your
Oh, you
idea
go.
of how to look at the collective.
Mm. I think sometimes I've thought about this before. People sometimes I think we're not always in the right place where we need to be. Like I feel like sometimes people are born into communities that don't fit how they are, or because there's two arguments to it where it's just like you should be like your community. If you're born in it, you should participate in your community. You're going to be better off that way. But sometimes that doesn't really fit your values all the time, and you can find yourself with very conflicting values to the community that you find yourself situated in, which is where
Yeah,
I think things like travel and going and visiting places to find the places that you do fit into so you can contribute to your community. I feel
yeah,
like that's where, skills like that or events like that come in handy. Um, I want to speak about the most impactful moment of your life. However, I would assume that it was the mission trip. Just
yeah. If you
based off
look,
hearing your story, I'm just gonna throw it out there if it's that.
no,
But
I
if
mean,
there's
if you
something
look at
else,
like how things have gone, like it changed. I mean, it changed me in many ways, but like if you look at like what I was wanting to do and then like what I've become, like it was a pivotal moment, a very pivotal
yeah,
moment for me.
100%. Have there been other moments like that, or is that like the big turning point for you?
I mean, I think that like looking at everything now and where I am, like I wouldn't be sitting here in an office at the university talking to you if it wasn't for that, right?
Right.
Like
It led
I
to.
never would have met, I mean, something could have happened, but I would have never met my wife,
Hmm.
right? Because I wouldn't have lived in Spain. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean it's a big game changer for me.
100%.
Yeah. So I
And
would say, yeah, it's probably the most pivotal moment.
what would you say, having had that happened and seeing how it had this effect on your life, brought you to where you are now? Um, what would you say is the major learning from how those things happen in life? You know, how you have these moments that turn and change and they lead to such and such. What would you say was the biggest thing you learned from noticing that?
I I think just to be accepting, right? I mean, I could have I could have been like, no, I don't want, like, oh, it makes more sense to become a doctor. I'm not going to move back to Spain. But I
Mm,
think, if I've learned anything is just follow your passions, do
mm,
things you love. And, you know, yeah, you're happy when you're doing things you love. So you might as well do them.
mm.
And then, work other things out. I mean, I can't say I loved working as an exterminator, but
Yeah,
what I mean? It was a moment where the opportunity presented itself. It came that I could live in Hawaii and body surf, and I was like, "Wow, that's an easy answer. I can go sweat and be dirty, and then I can body
yeah,
surf, right?" So, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I would say, yeah, just try to do what you love as much as you
yeah.
possibly can, because we're gonna have to do stuff we don't love. Right? So,
That's
as
right.
much as you possibly can, choose to do what you love, choose what you're passionate about.
That's right. And to go back to part of the philosophy chat, as long as it doesn't take away from the community, because what you love and your actions might start affecting someone else. And if it's
Yeah.
affecting them too much, then that's when you might need to reconsider what your actions are.
Yep. So be considerate. Don't take every wave.
No, as hard as it is though nice sharing it with your community of surfers that are around you. And like you said earlier, the people who turn up at the same tide, you get to know them really well, and you do want to share with them, and you take pride in the waves they're getting as much as the ones you're getting. You know, I think that's one beautiful thing about being out in the surf. We're moving into the final part of the episode here, and this part is where we sort of wrap things up a little bit and connect you with past guests and future guests. So in this part, I really like to just make sure I didn't miss anything and see if we can kind of build this string of or this thread between all of us that are coming on the show and talking and having these conversations. And the first question, this is a relatively new question. You're the second person I've asked it to. I feel like automatically you would have said poetry and philosophy if I'd asked you this earlier, but we got onto it. But what's something I didn't ask you, but I should have? Because I don't really know you apart from what you've told me today.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm always amazed about the things that come up in these shows that I had no idea were coming. And I find, as fascinating as the things I had planned, if not more. So what's something I didn't ask you, but I should have?
Um, uh, I don't know. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I played, semi-pro rugby in Europe for 15 seasons, and don't really have too many aches and pains. So that's pretty miraculous.
Yeah. What was it like playing? Could you speak the language well enough to communicate in Spanish while you were playing?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, you don't have to communicate in rugby; you just got to hit, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right. He's got to run into guys.
there's just the language of violence. It's an international language. No, it was. I mean, it was a really good. I could not believe, because that was the other thing that allowed me to live for so many years in Spain, right?
Yeah.
Because uh, honestly, like legally, I couldn't work, right?
Uh,
Because right, I didn't have papers, and so the playing rugby was, you know, they paid for my schooling. It gave me a place to stay. It also introduced me to people, like I met people that I never would have met before, and then
mm,
got to travel. um,
Mm.
and play, international tournaments and stuff like that. That was pretty amazing.
Wow. Wow. So that was kind of like your sporting passion, and in a weird way, and one of your passions piled together with another to allow you to do the one of the things you love the most.
Yeah.
Um, it's amazing how they kind of stack on top of each other. I've been considering this a lot lately as to, for example, how do good habits stack on top of each other and lead to like if you do one really good habit, it happens to be linked to a few other good ones just by chance. Um, and I feel like that's one of those things worth considering is how some of the choices we make, if they're really good choices or if there's something else we love, you don't know that it can't lead to supporting the other things that you love too, to come together in one big conglomerate piece. What did you learn playing rugby in all those years?
I think one of the concepts that I really, and I don't know if it's rugby specific or the teams I played on, but the idea that you're only as strong as the weakest link,
Mm,
you're only as fast as the slowest player,
mm,
right? And so um, that concept that's sometimes lost in sports, especially in team sports, that
mm.
like to build the team is stronger if everybody is built up, right? So
Yeah,
you're only as strong as the weakest player. So to progress as a team, the strongest player doesn't need to be stronger. They need to help the weakest player increase, right? And so I
mm,
think that's one of the concepts that I really enjoyed with rugby. The other is so you see so many times like rugby is a very violent sport, but rugby
mm,
also has what they call the third half, right?
mm.
So you play the first half, you play the second half, and then after a rugby game, the two teams that may have been, fighting like, very strong rivalry on the pitch, that
Mm,
it's over when the game's over. And
mm.
those two teams usually have like a meet and greet with food. Sometimes it's a dinner, but right? So it's like it allows you to like say, hey, this is on the pitch, but then after, like we can still be friends
Yeah,
and go out for a drink and socialize.
yeah. Which is amazing that there's actually a line drawn down there. It's competition for competition's sake when it's happening, and then when it's off the pitch, no, we're actually just not. We're not putting that together. We're actually mates here. On there, we might fight and go for it, but on here, we can all get along and talk
And
about
I think
rugby.
if you look at rugby, like even at the higher international levels, like it's a tradition to have that third time where there's a moment after the games where they spend time together and who, you know what I mean? So it makes the person you've been playing against a real person, right? You know them.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess in some ways that probably, when you get back to playing them again, it probably leads to you being a little bit more like still going and playing hard, but being a bit more compassionate for the person that you're charging at and running into. In a
Yeah.
way, maybe
You
not. I
hope.
don't
No.
know.
But I don't know. Yeah, I think that the weakest link and, was something that I really enjoyed and took away from the sport.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. Um, we're coming down to the last couple of questions here. So this one is one that will connect you. It's kind of like my way of, I guess, being a part of your world in a way, and you being maybe getting a chance to ask someone that you want to ask something later on in the time. So after your experience on the show and just seeing how it is and roughly how an episode goes, how I am as a host, what it brought out in you, is there anyone that you're thinking of or would think of that you'd be like, wow, actually, if I was in your spot, Alec, I would have them on the show and I'd ask them this?
Um, yeah. So my favorite rugby coach in
Mm-hmm.
Spain, um, her name is Mar Alvarez,
Mm-hmm.
and she's amazing. She's a good friend of mine, but she was also the best rugby coach I've ever had. And I would say she's
Yeah.
probably the best coach that I've ever had in any sport. Um, and it's not very common to have a female coach of a male team. She's been coaching top division Spanish male teams for the last 14, 16 years. And
Wow.
she actually was the strength and conditioning coach for the men's national team, probably for the last
Wow.
12 years. And
Wow.
yeah, so I think she's an amazing person. And if you could interview her, that would, if her English is probably as good as your Spanish, so you guys would have to go back and forth a little bit. But
No, I speak Spanish well enough to interview people in Spanish for sure.
oh, okay. And she speaks it because she travels like internationally with the team and everything. And she speaks English. She just doesn't like to. And so
Okay.
always
All
thinks her
right.
English would
Spanish
be better.
interview.
But yeah, Mar Alvarez Portillo, the greatest rugby coach ever.
Oh, wow. That's a big endorsement. I like it. If you could put me in touch with her, that'd be great. What would you ask her?
Who her favorite prop was. Hopefully she says me.
Yeah. In what period of time, or just in general?
And her whole life, I think hopefully she would say I was her favorite prop ever.
Okay, sounds good. And I guess we'd be talking about rugby and coaching. Is there anything else that would be worth sort of asking her about, or that would be definitely what you would talk to her about?
Oh, I mean, I'll also ask her like how she's navigated as a female in a male-dominated world.
Yeah,
how she succeeded.
True, great angle.
And even if that's an issue for her.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you for the recommendation. I like that one. I'm excited at the chance to potentially talk with her. The next part is you have a question here which was asked to you by Zuzana O'Hanlon. She was a Olympic race walker from the Czech Republic, and she had an awesome career training for that. And now she's a cafe owner in my local area here. Her life brought her to right near me, and we linked through coffee. And she asked you, who are you when no one's watching?
So you'd like to say the same person, right? But I would say I'm just a husband that loves his wife and a father that loves his daughters.
That's a nice answer. Your turn to leave a question. Do you have one for the next guest? It might be your coach randomly, but likely someone else.
Yeah.
I can't tell you who though.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. If you could create something, what would it be?
Okay, if you could create something, what would it be? Brilliant. Well, that brings us to the end of our show today. And I'm very grateful to have had you come on and share all of this that you have with me. I'm so stoked that I found out about your poetry and your time in Peru, and that you're a philosopher as well, because that's something that I've been saying to relook at and realize that this whole show is kind of basically philosophy based in a way. It's finding out about how people are and how they do what they do, and hopefully sharing that with others in the same way that you share your creative things. I want to share this with people too. And I'm grateful for your time above all things, your knowledge, your time, and just sharing this moment with me to help me learn more about life, and also with our guests too. So Zachary Payne, thank you for coming on to Between Views.
It's been a pleasure.
What an insightful and inspiring journey with Zachary Payne. His story is a powerful testament to embracing the unexpected, finding deep meaning in unexpected places like the ocean and poetry, and redefining what it means to live a rich life through valuing time over possessions. From navigating life as an undocumented resident to teaching philosophy and raising a bilingual family, Zach reminds us to pursue our passions and share our creations with the world. Thank you for joining us on Between Views. Remember to subscribe, rate and review, and join us next time for another captivating conversation.